Elijah Barnes didn't plan to save anyone that morning. He'd buried his heart 2 winters ago alongside his wife, and he'd sworn on her grave that he'd never let himself care about another soul again. But when he saw Hannah Marshall collapsed in the frozen mud outside Crane's general store, her lips blue, her hand still reaching for mercy that would never come, something cracked open inside his chest. He didn't know it yet, but that moment, that one choice to step forward when everyone else stepped back, would cost him everything. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel and stay with me until the very end of this story. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far Hannah and Elijah's journey reaches across this world. Fort Bridger, Wyoming Territory, January 1876. The cold came down like judgment. Elijah Barnes felt it in his bones as the wagon rattled over the frozen ruts leading into Fort Bridger. Beside him, Jacob sat rigid as iron, his 10-year-old face already learning the hard lessons of silence. In the back, Clara hummed softly under the buffalo hide, still young enough to believe the world might be kind. "Papa," Jacob said quietly, "we got enough money for flour." Elijah's jaw tightened. $23. That's what remained after paying off the banknote last month. $23 to feed 3 people through the rest of winter. "We'll manage." "That ain't an answer." "It's the only one I got, son." The boy fell silent. He was learning that sometimes a man's word had to be enough, even when the numbers said different. The town came into view, wooden buildings hunched against the wind, smoke rising thin and desperate from chimneys. Fort Bridger wasn't much, just a trading post that got ideas above its station when the railroad surveyors came through last fall. Now folks talked about civilization like it was something you could order from a Sears catalog. Elijah didn't believe in civilization anymore. Civilization was what told him his wife died clean and peaceful, when the truth was she'd bled out screaming while he was 30 miles away fetching supplies. That didn't matter. 2 years. 2 years since Sarah died, and the guilt still tasted fresh as copper. "Papa, stop." Clara's voice cut through his thoughts. She was standing in the wagon bed, one small hand pointing toward the general store. "There's a lady on the ground." Elijah pulled the reins. The horses snorted, their breath clouding white. At first he thought it was a pile of rags some drunk had left in the street. Then the rags moved. A woman, kneeling in the frozen mud outside Silas Crane's store. Her dress was thin as paper, her hair falling loose from its pins. She wasn't begging aloud that would have required strength she clearly didn't have. She just knelt there, one hand extended palm up, waiting. "Sweet Jesus," Elijah breathed. 3 women passed her without looking down. A man in a fine coat stepped around her like she was a hole in the street. Nobody stopped. Nobody even slowed. "Why won't they help her?" Clara's voice shook. Jacob climbed down from the wagon, his face hard. "Because folks don't help people they've decided deserve suffering." The boy was 10 years old and already understood cruelty better than kindness. Elijah's hands tightened on the reins. Every instinct screamed at him to drive on. He had 2 children depending on him. $23. A winter that wouldn't quit. He couldn't afford to care about a stranger's troubles. But then the woman looked up. Her eyes met his across 20 feet of frozen street, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Not of faces, but of something deeper. The look of people who'd already lost everything and were still somehow expected to keep breathing. "Stay with the wagon," Elijah said. "Papa, stay." He climbed down slowly, his boots crunching on ice. As he got closer, he could see she was younger than he'd thought, maybe 30, though hardship had carved years into her face. Her lips were cracked and bloodless. Her fingernails were torn. She didn't speak, didn't beg, just looked at him with those hollow eyes and waited for whatever fresh cruelty he'd bring. Elijah reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the last of the hardtack he'd packed that morning. It wasn't much, half a biscuit really, but it was something. He held it out. The woman stared at it like it might vanish if she blinked. "Go on," he said quietly. "Take it." Her hand trembled as she reached for the biscuit. When her fingers closed around it, a sound escaped her throat, half sob, half prayer. "Thank you," she whispered. "God bless you, sir." "Ain't God's doing, ma'am. Just common decency." "Decency ain't common in this town." Before he could respond, a voice cut through the cold like a knife. "You feeding strays now, Barnes?" Silas Crane stood in the doorway of his store, arms crossed over his substantial belly. He was a big man, soft in all the wrong places, with small eyes that calculated the price of everything and the value of nothing. "Saw a woman in need," Elijah said evenly. "Helped her." "That ain't a woman. That's Hannah Marshall." Crane spat the name like it tasted foul. "And she ain't welcome on my property." The woman Hannah flinched but didn't move. Elijah noticed she'd already eaten the hardtack, swallowed it so fast she must have barely tasted it. "She's in the street," Elijah pointed out. "Your property ends at the door." "My business ends when I say it ends." Crane stepped forward. "You're new enough to town you don't know Barnes, so I'll tell you plain. That woman's husband was Thomas Marshall. You heard of him?" "Can't say I have." "Outlaw, rustler. Killed a deputy in Cheyenne last year. They hanged him in November, and good riddance." Crane's voice rose, making sure everyone on the street could hear. "Now his widow comes crawling back here expecting Christian charity after her man's crimes." Elijah looked at Hannah. She'd gone very still, her eyes fixed on the frozen mud. "Man pays for his own sins," Elijah said. "Wife don't inherit guilt." "That's where you're wrong." The voice came from behind him. Elijah turned to find Reverend Josiah Stone approaching Bible clutched in his pale hands. The preacher was tall and thin as a fence post, with eyes that burned with the kind of certainty Elijah had learned to distrust. "Deuteronomy 24, Stone intoned. The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin." "Then seems like the matter's settled," Elijah said. "You didn't let me finish." Stone's smile was cold. "The scripture refers to legal punishment, but divine judgment that follows the bloodline. This woman carries her husband's taint. To shelter her is to invite darkness into your home." "That's horseshit, Reverend, and you know it." Gasps rippled through the small crowd gathering. "You didn't contradict the Reverend. Not in public." Stone's face flushed. "You dare—" "I dare speak plain truth." Elijah cut him off. "My wife taught Sunday school in this very town before we moved out to the homestead. She read that same Bible cover to cover 3 times. And if she were standing here right now, she'd be ashamed of every one of you." Silence crashed over the street. Hannah slowly raised her head. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. Something fiercer burned there, defiance maybe, or just the stubborn refusal to break completely. "Mr. Barnes," she said softly, "you don't have to—" "You read and write, Mrs. Marshall." The question caught her off guard. Yes, I was a school teacher in Kansas City before I married." "You know figures, basic arithmetic?" "Yes, sir." Elijah turned to Crane. "Then I'm hiring her. My homestead needs a bookkeeper to track supplies and manage the household accounts. Room and board included plus $20 a month." The lie came easy. He didn't need a bookkeeper, he could barely afford to feed his own family. But something in Hannah's eyes told him she'd rather die than accept charity, and a job was different from pity. Crane's face went purple. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. I'm offering honest work to an honest woman." "You got a legal objection, Silas." "The town won't stand for it. The town can go to hell." Elijah offered his hand to Hannah. She stared at it for a long moment, then slowly, carefully placed her palm in his. Her hand was ice cold and light as bird bones. He pulled her to her feet. She swayed dizzy from hunger and cold, and Elijah steadied her with a hand on her elbow. Up close, he could see the desperation carved into every line of her face. This wasn't just hunger. This was someone who'd been systematically destroyed by cruelty masquerading as righteousness. "I can't pay you back," she whispered. "Not right away." "Didn't ask you to." "I won't be trouble." "Didn't figure you would be." "Mr. Barnes." Her voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her, then really looked at her, and saw himself 2 years ago. Saw the moment they'd lowered Sarah's coffin into frozen ground, while neighbors whispered about God's will and divine plans. Saw the nights he'd sat alone by the fire wondering why he should bother getting up the next morning. "Because somebody should have done it 3 weeks ago," he said quietly. "And nobody did." Tears spilled down her cheeks then, but she wiped them away quickly. Pride, maybe? Or just the habit of not letting anyone see you break? "Barnes." Reverend Stone's voice shook with fury. "You bring that woman into your home, you'll answer to God." Elijah turned slowly. The crowd had grown maybe 20 people now, all watching with that hungry look folks get when drama unfolds in small towns. "Reverend," Elijah said, his voice carrying clear and cold across the street, "I already answered to God once. November of '73, when my wife died screaming because I wasn't there to help her. I got down on my knees in the mud and I asked him why. You know what answer I got?" Stone said nothing. Silence. Elijah's hands clenched at his sides. "So if God wants to judge me for showing mercy to a starving woman, he's gonna have to get in line behind my own conscience. And that line's already pretty damn long." He turned back to Hannah. "You coming?" She nodded mutely. "Then let's get you out of this cold." He helped her up into the wagon. Clara immediately wrapped the buffalo hide around her shoulders. Jacob watched warily, not hostile, but not welcoming either. "This is Clara and Jacob," Elijah said, climbing back onto the bench. "They're good kids. They'll help you settle in." Hannah pulled the hide closer, her teeth chattering. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Don't say nothing yet. Wait till you see the place. Might change your mind about thanking me." He snapped the reins, and the horses started forward. As they rolled past Crane's store, Elijah caught sight of a man standing in the shadows of the alley. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a deputy's badge. Tom Garrett. The man watched with cold eyes, his hand resting on his gun belt. Their eyes met for just a moment. Then Garrett turned and walked away. "Papa," Jacob said quietly. "Who was that?" "Nobody important." But the lie tasted bitter. Tom Garrett had been at Sarah's funeral, had offered his condolences with words that sounded practiced, had looked at Elijah with something that might have been pity, or might have been satisfaction. Elijah pushed the thought away. He had more immediate problems. Behind them, the town watched. In Fort Bridger, people loved 2 things, gossip and judgment. By sundown, everyone would know Elijah Barnes had taken in the hanged man's widow. By morning, they'd have decided what it meant. Let them talk. He'd learned long ago that words couldn't hurt you if you stopped caring what they meant. Beside him, Hannah shivered despite the buffalo hide. She looked half dead, and Elijah wondered if he'd just saved her or simply extended her suffering. 15 miles to the homestead," he said. "You need to stop and rest, you tell me." "I'll manage." "That ain't an answer." She glanced at him surprised. Then the ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. "It's the only one I got, Mr. Barnes." Despite everything, Elijah found himself almost smiling back. The wagon creaked onward through the frozen landscape. Behind them, Fort Bridger disappeared into the white distance. Ahead lay the homestead, 160 acres of hard ground and harder memories. And somewhere in between, Elijah Barnes carried a woman who'd been left to die by everyone who claimed to follow God's law. He didn't know if he was saving her or damning himself. Time would tell. The cold deepened as they left civilization behind. The road, if you could call it that, was more suggestion than reality. a pair of frozen ruts cutting through endless white. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and unforgiving. The wind carried the smell of pine and coming snow. Hannah sat rigid in the wagon bed, clutching the buffalo hide like it might save her soul. Clara had nestled close to her, the child's natural warmth, a small kindness in the brutal cold. Jacob remained separate, watching Hannah with eyes older than his years. Elijah didn't blame the boy. Jacob had learned caution the hard way, watching his mother die while his father was gone. Trust wasn't something you gave freely after that. "Mrs. Marshall," Clara piped up. "Are you going to stay forever?" "Clara," Elijah warned. "It's all right." Hannah's voice was rough from disuse. "I don't know, sweetheart. That's up to your father. Papa says we need help. Says the homestead's too much for 3 people. That wasn't quite what Elijah had said, but close enough. The truth was harder. The homestead was too much for one broken man and 2 children still learning to live without their mother. "Well," Hannah said carefully, "I'll help as long as I'm able." "You know how to cook?" "Some. Mama used to make apple butter. Do you know how to make apple butter?" Hannah's eyes closed briefly. "No, honey. I don't." Clara's face fell. Jacob shot Elijah a look that said, "See. She's not Mama. Nobody could be." "Apple butter's a spring thing anyway," Elijah said gruffly. "Winter's for simple food. Stew, biscuits, things that stick to your ribs." "I can do that," Hannah said. "I can do that much at least." Silence settled over them again, broken only by the creak of wheels and the horses' labored breathing. The cold was merciless. Elijah's face had gone numb an hour ago. His hands ached where he gripped the reins. "Mr. Barnes," Hannah said suddenly, "what happened to your wife?" The question hit like a fist to the gut. Jacob's head snapped up. Clara went very still. "She died," Elijah said flatly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "She died birthing our 3rd child, November of '73. I was in Laramie fetching winter supplies. Storm came up unexpected. By the time I got home..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "Baby didn't make it neither. We buried them together." The silence that followed was different, heavier. "I'm so sorry," Hannah whispered. "You said that already." "I mean it." "I know you do." Elijah's voice came out harsher than he intended. "Everyone meant it. Every single person at the funeral meant it. Didn't change nothing." Hannah looked away, and Elijah immediately regretted his tone. She was trying to be kind, and he'd thrown it back in her face like she'd earned his bitterness. "Your husband," he said after a moment. "Tom Garrett mentioned something about Cheyenne." Hannah's hands tightened on the buffalo hide. "They hanged him November 12th, 2 months ago." "What did he do? Does it matter?" "Might." She was quiet for so long Elijah thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Thomas wasn't a bad man when I married him. He was kind, gentle. But something in him broke after we lost our land in Kansas. Drought took the crops 3 years running. Bank foreclosed. We had nothing." "That don't excuse murder." "No." Her voice was small. "It doesn't." "So what happened in Cheyenne?" "He fell in with Black Jack McCrae's gang, started rustling cattle. One night a deputy caught them in the act. There was shooting. The deputy died." She took a shaking breath. "They arrested Thomas 3 days later. Trial lasted 1 afternoon. They hanged him at sunrise. And his gang? Still out there. McCrae sends me letters sometimes. Says Thomas owed him money. Says I'm responsible for the debt." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "That's why I went to Fort Bridger. Thought maybe distance would keep me safe." Elijah's jaw tightened. "How much money?" $500. $500. A fortune. More money than most folks saw in 5 years. McCrae know where you are. He knows I'm in the territory. Doesn't know exactly where. Hannah looked at him with haunted eyes. I'm sorry, Mr. Barnes. I should have told you before you offered help. If McCrae finds out you're sheltering me, then I'll deal with McCrae. You don't understand. I understand plenty. Elijah kept his eyes on the road. I spent 4 years as an Army scout, chased Cheyenne raiders through country that had freezed the balls off a brass monkey, shot men who needed shooting, buried men who didn't deserve dying. I seen enough violence to last 3 lifetimes. He glanced at her then. I also learned that running from trouble just means you're tired when it catches up. So if Blackjack McCrae wants to come calling, he's welcome to try. But he won't like how that conversation ends. Hannah stared at him. You'd risk your children for me. I'm risking my children by bringing you home, by not bringing you home, by existing in a world where men like McCrae walk free, while women like you starve in the street. Elijah's voice was hard. There ain't no safe choices, Mrs. Marshall. Just choices you can live with and choices you can't. And you can live with this one. He thought about that. Thought about Sarah's grave on the hill. Thought about the promise he'd made to himself that he'd never care about anyone again, never open himself to that kind of pain. He thought about Hannah kneeling in the frozen mud while good Christians stepped around her like she was garbage. Yeah, he said finally. I can live with this one. The homestead appeared as the sun touched the western mountains. It wasn't much a log cabin with a stone chimney, a barn that leaned slightly to the left. Split rail fences marking off pasture land, now buried under snow. But it was solid, built to last. Sarah had loved it. She'd stood on this exact spot 3 years ago and declared it the most beautiful place in the world. Elijah had thought she was crazy. Now he understood. Beauty wasn't about the land. It was about possibility. About the future you could build if you just had enough stubbornness and faith. He didn't have much faith left, but stubbornness that he had in spades. This is it, he said unnecessarily. Hannah climbed down from the wagon, moving stiffly. She stood for a moment looking at the cabin, and something flickered across her face, longing maybe, or grief for homes she'd lost. It's beautiful, she said softly. Clara beamed. Jacob remained skeptical. Come on, Elijah said. Let's get you inside before you freeze solid. The cabin was cold. The fire had died to embers while they were gone, but it was shelter. Elijah stirred the coals back to life, while Hannah stood uncertainly near the door, still wrapped in the buffalo hide. Loft's up there, Elijah said, nodding toward the ladder. 3 beds. You'll take the one by the window, warmest spot. Where will you sleep? Down here. Got a bedroll by the fire. That's not right. You should have the loft. Mrs. Marshall, I ain't gonna argue about sleeping arrangements while we both freeze. Take the loft. She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Nodded. Clara grabbed her hand. I'll show you Mama's quilt is up there. It's really pretty. Papa won't let nobody touch it, but you can look. Hannah glanced at Elijah. He nodded stiffly. Go on. The two of them climbed the ladder, Clara chattering, Hannah silent. Jacob remained below, watching his father with careful eyes. You sure about this? The boy asked quietly. No. Then why? Because I'm trying to teach you something, Jacob. Elijah hung his coat on the peg by the door. Your mama used to say the measure of a man ain't what he does when it's easy. It's what he does when it costs him something. What's this costing you? Everything, Elijah thought. My peace, my safety. Maybe my life if McCrae comes calling. We'll find out, he said instead. Above them, Clara's voice carried down. See, Mama made it herself. Every flower is different. That's a columbine. That's Indian paintbrush. It's beautiful, Hannah interrupted gently. Your mother must have been very talented. She was the best mama in the whole world. I'm sure she was, sweetheart. Elijah turned away, jaw tight. The grief was always there waiting. Some days it was background noise, Other days it was a howling storm. Today it was both. "I'm going to tend the horses," he told Jacob. "You stay here. Get the stew started." "Yes, sir." Elijah stepped back into the cold. The wind had picked up, carrying the promise of more snow. He led the horses to the barn, unhitched, then rubbed them down with handfuls of straw. The familiar work settled him. When he finally returned to the cabin, full dark had fallen. Golden light spilled from the windows. Smoke rose steady from the chimney. From outside, it looked like home. Inside, it felt like something else, something unfamiliar and frightening. Hannah stood at the stove, stirring a pot. She'd taken off the filthy dress and wore one of Sarah's old work dresses, too big in the shoulders, too short in the hem, but clean. Her hair was pulled back in a simple braid. She looked up when he entered. Their eyes met. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "Clara said I could borrow—" "It's fine." "The stew's nearly ready. Jacob showed me where you keep the salt pork and beans." "That's fine too." Awkward silence stretched between them. Clara broke it. "Mrs. Marshall knows a song. She taught it to me." "Did she now?" "It's about a bird, a meadowlark. Can she sing it at supper?" "If she wants." Hannah shook her head quickly. "I don't think—" "Please." Clara's eyes were huge. "Please, please, please." Hannah glanced at Elijah. He shrugged. "One song won't hurt." So they ate stew and hardtack, and when the meal was done, Hannah sang. Her voice was rough from disuse, but true. The song was about a meadowlark that lost its mate and had to learn to sing alone. When she finished, Clara clapped. Jacob looked away, blinking rapidly. Elijah said nothing, just stared into his empty bowl and tried not to think about Sarah humming while she worked about the silence that had filled this cabin for 2 years. "Time for bed," he said roughly. "All of you. Long day tomorrow." The children climbed to the loft. Hannah started to follow, then paused. "Mr. Barnes?" "Yeah." "Thank you for everything." "You can thank me by making yourself useful. Winter's hard. We all gotta pull weight." "I will. I promise." She climbed the ladder. Elijah banked the fire, unrolled his bedroll, lay down fully clothed. Sleep didn't come. Above him, he heard soft whispers. Clara talking. Hannah responding. The creak of ropes as someone shifted in bed. Elijah stared at the ceiling and wondered what the hell he'd done. Outside, the wind howled. Snow began to fall. And 15 miles away in Fort Bridger, Tom Garrett sat in his small room above the jail and wrote a letter to Blackjack McCrae, telling him exactly where to find Hannah Marshall. The price for information, $200. Garrett sealed the envelope, poured himself another whiskey, and tried not to think about the fact that he'd just condemned an innocent woman to death. But then, Hannah Marshall wasn't really innocent, was she? She'd married a killer. That made her guilty enough. At least that's what Garrett told himself as he drank, until the guilt stopped talking. The first week passed like walking through deep snow, slow, exhausting every step forward. A battle. Hannah woke before dawn each morning, slipping down the ladder in darkness to stir the fire. Elijah would find her there already, working her hands red and chapped from cold water and lye soap. She never complained, never asked for anything. Just moved through the cabin like a ghost, afraid of taking up space. It drove him half crazy. "You don't have to scrub the floor again," he said on the third morning. "It's clean enough." "There's dirt in the corners." "There's always dirt in the corners. It's a homestead, not a palace." Hannah didn't look up. "I need to earn my keep." "You are earning it. You fed the chickens yesterday. Helped Jacob with his arithmetic. That's earning. It's not enough." Elijah crouched down beside her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Who told you it wasn't enough?" She flinched. "Nobody." "Somebody did. Somebody put that fear in you." "Mr. Barnes." "Elijah. Just Elijah." She shook her head. "That wouldn't be proper." "Proper." He almost laughed. "Mrs. Marshall, I got you sleeping 10 feet above my head in a cabin miles from civilization. Proper sailed away the minute you climbed in my wagon." A flush crept up her neck. "I meant no disrespect. And I meant no offense." He stood, his knees cracking. "I'm just saying, you don't have to kill yourself proving your worth. You're here. That's enough." But it wasn't enough for Hannah. By the end of that first week, she'd mended every piece of clothing in the house, reorganized the root cellar, and taught Clara how to card wool. She moved like a woman racing against an invisible clock. Jacob watched her with wary eyes. "She's afraid," he told Elijah one night when they were checking the livestock. "Afraid we'll send her away." "We won't." "But she don't know that." Jacob pitched hay into the stall, his young face serious. "She's waiting for the other boot to drop." "Smart kid. Too smart sometimes." "Give her time," Elijah said. Time. That was all he could offer. Time and space, and the hope that eventually Hannah would stop moving like a woman waiting to be struck. But time was running out faster than any of them knew. The letter reached Black Jack McCrae on a Tuesday. He sat in a Cheyenne saloon, reading Garrett's words, his scarred face splitting into a grin. Behind him, his two remaining men, Charlie Bates and Ed Wilson, played cards and drank rot-gut whiskey. "Boys," McCrae said, folding the letter carefully, "I found our little widow." Charlie looked up. He was young, maybe 25, with cold eyes and quick hands. "Where?" "Some homestead outside Fort Bridger, shacked up with a man named Elijah Barnes." "How much is Garrett asking?" "200. Worth it to get what Thomas owed us." Ed Wilson spat tobacco juice on the floor. He was older, mean as a snake, with a scar running from his eye to his jaw. "Thomas is dead. Debt died with him." "That's where you're wrong, Eddie." McCrae stood, stretching his tall frame. "The debt transferred to his widow. That's how these things work." "That ain't how nothing works. You just want an excuse to hurt somebody." McCrae's smile never wavered. "Maybe so, but Thomas Marshall stole from me, took $300 and got himself hanged before he could pay it back. His wife owes me that money plus interest. $500 total. She ain't got $500? Then she'll work it off. I know a house in Laramie that'll pay good money for a woman who still has her looks." Charlie shifted uncomfortably. "Jack, maybe we should just let this go." "You questioning me?" "No, sir, just saying." "Then don't say nothing." McCrae's voice went cold. "We ride for Fort Bridger tomorrow, and we collect what's owed." Hannah woke in darkness, her heart hammering. The dream again, always the same. Thomas on the gallows, the rope around his neck, his eyes finding hers in the crowd. Not apologizing, not asking forgiveness, just looking at her like she was the one who'd betrayed him. Then the trapdoor opening, the drop, the silence. She sat up, pulling the thin blanket around her shoulders. Beside her, Clara slept peacefully. Across the loft, Jacob breathed steady and deep. Below, she heard movement. Elijah banking the fire, probably. The man never seemed to sleep. Hannah climbed down the ladder as quietly as she could. Elijah stood by the hearth, shirtless, using a rag to clean blood from his knuckles. "What happened?" she asked. He jumped, startled. "Thought you were asleep." "What happened to your hand?" "Nothing. Split wood without gloves. Stupid." "But that wasn't blood from wood cutting. That was blood from hitting something, or someone." "Elijah." He looked at her, then really looked at her, and something passed between them. Recognition of lies. Understanding of secrets kept. "Had a visitor while you were sleeping," he admitted. "Drunk from town. Silas Crane sent him to deliver a message." Hannah's stomach dropped. "What message?" "That I got 2 weeks to send you away or face consequences." "What kind of consequences?" The kind men like Crane think they can enforce with threats and intimidation. Elijah rapped his knuckles carefully. I sent him back with a split lip and a message of my own. You shouldn't have done that. Probably not. They'll come back. Crane won't let this go. Let them come. Hannah moved closer, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. You don't understand. Men like Crane, they don't fight fair. They'll burn your barn, poison your well, hurt your children. Then I'll kill them. The words came out flat and certain. Not a threat. A promise. You'd hang. Maybe. Elijah met her eyes. But my kids would be safe. That's all that matters. And what about them growing up without a father? You think that's better? They're already growing up without a mother. His voice cracked. I'm doing the best I can, Mrs. Marshall. And right now the best I can do is not let fear make me into something my wife would have been ashamed of. Hannah reached out her fingers, brushing his damaged knuckles. Sarah must have been an extraordinary woman. She was ordinary in every way that mattered. That's what made her extraordinary. Elijah pulled his hand back gently. She believed people were fundamentally good, even when evidence suggested otherwise. Do you believe that? I used to. And now I think people are fundamentally afraid, and fear makes us do terrible things. He sat down heavily on the bench. You should go back to bed. Dawn comes early. But Hannah didn't move. Can I ask you something? Why'd you really bring me here? And don't say it was about bookkeeping or household help. I know that's a lie. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, an owl called. When Sarah died, he said finally, I wanted to die too. Thought about it every day for 6 months. The only thing that stopped me was knowing Jacob and Clara needed somebody. But I wasn't living. I was just existing, moving through days like a ghost. He looked up at her. Then I saw you in that street, and I saw myself. Saw what I'd become if I kept letting grief run my life. And I thought maybe if I could save you, I could save myself too. The honesty of it hit Hannah like a physical blow. That's a heavy burden to put on a stranger. I know. And if I can't carry it, then we'll both sink. He smiled, but it was sad. Least we won't drown alone. Hannah sat beside him on the bench. Their shoulders nearly touched. In the firelight, she could see the scars on his chest, old wounds from his army days probably. Evidence of a life lived hard. My husband wasn't always a criminal, she said quietly. When I met him, he was gentle, kind. He read poetry. Can you imagine a cowboy who read Wordsworth? What changed him? Loss, failure, the slow, crushing weight of trying and failing and trying again until you got nothing left but bitterness. She traced a pattern on her knee. The drought took everything. Our land, our hope. Thomas started drinking, then gambling, then worse. You could have left. Where would I go? I had no money, no family, no skills except teaching, and no school would hire a woman whose husband was known as a drunk. Her voice hardened. So I stayed, and I watched him become someone I didn't recognize. That why you didn't cry at his hanging? Hannah's head snapped toward him. How'd you? Garrett mentioned it. Said you stood there dry-eyed while they put the rope around his neck. Would you have cried? Probably not. Then you understand. She stood abruptly. I should sleep. Morning comes early like you said. Hannah. She stopped at the base of the ladder. You ain't responsible for what he became. You know that, right? She didn't answer, just climbed the ladder and disappeared into the darkness of the loft. Elijah sat alone by the fire, listening to the house settle around him. Somewhere above, he heard Hannah crying soft, muffled sobs she thought nobody could hear. He didn't go to her. Some grief was too private for witnesses. But he stayed awake until the crying stopped, keeping vigil over a woman who'd forgotten what it meant to be protected. 3 days later, Tom Garrett rode out to the homestead. Elijah was splitting wood when he saw the deputy approaching. He drove the axe into the stump and waited hands loose at his sides. Garrett dismounted slowly, his badge catching the weak winter sun. "Barnes." "Garrett." "Need to talk to you." "So talk." Garrett glanced toward the cabin. Through the window, Hannah was visible teaching Clara something at the table. "Private conversation might be better." "Anything you got to say you can say right here." The deputy's jaw tightened. "Fine. I'm here in an official capacity. Got complaints from concerned citizens about the situation on your homestead." "What situation would that be?" "An unmarried woman living under your roof. It ain't proper." Elijah almost laughed. "That's what this is about, propriety. It's about the law. Territorial statutes clearly state. The territorial statutes can kiss my ass, Tom. I'm not breaking any law." "You're harboring a woman of questionable character." "I'm employing a woman who needed work. There's a difference." Garrett stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You really don't remember me, do you? Should I? Sarah's funeral. I was there. Stood right next to you at the graveside." Elijah studied him more carefully. "Yeah, I remember. You offered condolences." "I offered more than that." Garrett's face twisted. "I offered to help with the kids. Told you Sarah would have wanted someone to look after you all. And I thanked you. Then I went home. You went home and shut yourself away like a hermit. Wouldn't accept help from nobody. Didn't need help. You needed something." Garrett's voice turned bitter. "But you wouldn't take it from me. Wouldn't take it from anyone. And now this woman shows up and suddenly you're playing the hero." Understanding dawned slowly. "You were sweet on Sarah." "I loved her." The words came out raw. "Loved her since we were 15 years old. But she chose you. And I accepted that. Even stood up in your wedding like a damn fool." "Tom." "Then she died. And I thought maybe—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "But you didn't want anything from me. Not comfort, not friendship, nothing. So this is revenge. You're hassling me because I didn't need your help. I'm doing my job." But the lie was obvious. "I'm keeping the peace in this territory. By threatening an innocent woman. Hannah Marshall ain't innocent. Her husband is dead." Elijah's voice went cold. "And last I checked, we don't punish women for their husbands' crimes in this territory. Or has the law changed?" Garrett said nothing. "Here's how this is gonna go," Elijah continued. "You're gonna get back on your horse. You're gonna ride back to Fort Bridger, and you're gonna tell whoever sent you that Hannah Marshall is under my protection. Anyone who wants to hurt her is gonna have to come through me first. We clear? You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be my first." Garrett mounted his horse, his face tight with barely controlled rage. "Black Jack McCrae is coming. You know that, right? I got word he's looking for her." Elijah's blood ran cold, but he kept his voice steady. "How'd McCrae know where to find her? Maybe someone told him." Garrett's smile was cruel. "Maybe someone figured a killer's widow deserves what she's got coming." "You son of a bitch. I'm doing this town a favor. McCrae cleans up your mess and everyone's better off." He wheeled his horse around. "You should have accepted my help when I offered it, Elijah. Now it's too late." He rode off at a gallop, leaving Elijah standing in the snow with murder in his heart. Hannah appeared in the doorway. "What did he want?" "Nothing." "Don't lie to me." I heard his voice. "What did he want?" Elijah turned to face her. "McCrae knows where you are," Garrett told him. The color drained from her face. "When? Don't know. Could be days. Could be weeks. But he's coming. Then I have to leave. Right now. If I'm gone when he arrives, he'll burn my homestead looking for you. Maybe hurt my kids to make me talk." Elijah shook his head. "Running won't solve this." "Then what will?" "We stand our ground. Together. You can't fight McCrae. He's got... I spent 4 years tracking Cheyenne war parties through country that'd kill you just for looking at it wrong. I've fought in blizzards and dust storms, and once in a creek bed during a flash flood. Elijah met her eyes. I ain't afraid of Black Jack McCrae. You should be. He's killed... Lots of men have killed Hannah. Don't make them invincible. Just makes them dangerous. He put a hand on her shoulder. You're staying. We're fighting. And when McCrae shows up, we're gonna send him to hell where he belongs. Hannah searched his face. Why are you doing this? Because Sarah would've. The truth of it settled over him like peace. And because I'm tired of letting fear run my life. They prepared like soldiers before battle. Elijah spent the next 2 days checking every rifle, every pistol, every round of ammunition. He showed Jacob how to load the Spencer repeating rifle, how to aim, how to breathe steady before pulling the trigger. You're 10 years old, he said quietly. You shouldn't have to know this. But I do need to know it. Yeah, you do. Hannah proved she wasn't helpless. She'd grown up with brothers in Kansas, learned to shoot before she learned to sew. When Elijah handed her an old Colt revolver, she checked the cylinder and sighted down the barrel like she'd been doing it all her life. My brothers taught me, she explained, before the drought. They still alive? Don't know. Lost touch years ago. She holstered the gun. Probably better that way, less people to disappoint. Clara was too young to fight, but old enough to hide. They showed her the root cellar beneath the cabin floor, a space barely 4 feet across, cold and dark, but safe. If shooting starts, you get down there and you don't come out for nothing, Elijah instructed. Not till one of us tells you it's safe. Understand? Clara's lower lip trembled. I'm scared, Papa. I know, baby. Me too. But you're gonna protect us, right? He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, wood smoke and child sweetness. With my last breath. That night, Hannah cooked venison stew. They ate in tense silence, listening to the wind howl outside. Every creak of wood, every snap of a branch sent Elijah's hand to his gun. Could be days, Hannah said. Could be weeks. Could be hours. You think he's close? I think Garrett wrote that letter at least 2 weeks ago, and I think McCrae ain't the patient type. What if... Hannah stopped. What if I just give him the money? You got $500. No, but maybe I could work out some kind of arrangement. Payment plan. Men like McCrae don't do payment plans. Elijah pushed his bowl away. He wants you dead or enslaved. Money's just the excuse. Then what's the answer? We kill him first. The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara climbed down from the table and went to Hannah, crawling into her lap. The woman stiffened in surprise, then slowly wrapped her arms around the child. Will you sing me the Meadowlark song? Clara asked. Sweetheart? I don't think... Please. Hannah looked at Elijah. He nodded. So she sang, her voice soft and aching, about the bird who lost everything, but kept singing anyway. When she finished, Clara was asleep in her arms. I'll take her up, Hannah whispered. She carried the girl to the loft, tucking her in with such gentleness it made Elijah's throat ache. When she came back down, Jacob had already retreated to his own bed. They were alone. You don't have to do this, Hannah said. You could still send me away. Save yourself and your children. Could do lots of things. Won't, though. Why? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting other people decide what's right and wrong. He stood, moving to the window. And because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then, I see that in you too. Their eyes met across the cabin. Something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it. The tentative recognition that maybe, just maybe, broken people could build something whole together. Get some sleep, Elijah said roughly. I'll take first watch. Wake me in 4 hours. We'll switch. Hannah. I'm not going to sleep while you stay up all night. Wake me in 4 hours, Elijah. That's an order. Despite everything, he smiled. Yes, ma'am. She climbed to the loft. Elijah settled by the window with his rifle across his knees, watching the darkness for movement. Outside, the temperature dropped. Stars burned cold and distant. And 15 miles away, 3 men rode toward the homestead with murder on their minds. Blackjack McCrae was coming. And before the sun rose again, blood would stain the snow. They came at dawn. Elijah saw them from a quarter-mile away, 3 riders moving slow through the gray light. He touched Hannah's shoulder where she slept on the bench beside him. She woke instantly, reaching for her gun. They're here. She moved to the window, peering out. That's McCrae, the tall one. Other 2 are Charlie Bates and Ed Wilson. Dangerous. All of them. But McCrae's the worst. He'll talk first. Try to make it seem reasonable. Then he'll kill you while you're still listening. Good to know. Elijah checked his rifle. Get the kids in the cellar. Hannah climbed the ladder quickly. Within minutes, Clara was hidden beneath the floor, crying softly, but obediently silent. Jacob wanted to fight, but Elijah's look brooked no argument. You protect your sister. That's your job today. Nothing else. Yes, sir. They closed the cellar door, just as hoofbeats sounded outside. Hannah Marshall. McCrae's voice boomed across the frozen yard. I know you're in there. Come on out. Let's talk civilized. Elijah positioned himself by the door, rifle ready. Hannah stood to his left, the Colt steady in her hands. She ain't interested in talking, Elijah called back. Silence. Then, that the homesteader Elijah Barnes? That's right. This ain't your fight, Barnes. Send out the woman and we'll be on our way. Can't do that. You protecting a thief and a debtor? I'm protecting an innocent woman. McCrae laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Innocent. Her husband stole from me. That makes her guilty by marriage. Her husband's dead. Debt died with him. Not how I see it. Then we got a problem. Another pause. When McCrae spoke again, his voice had gone cold. I got 12 men waiting in the trees. You're surrounded. Send her out now or we burn you out. Hannah's face went white. He's bluffing. Maybe. If he had 12 men, he would have sent them already. Probably. Elijah raised his voice. I count 3 horses, McCrae. You, Bates, and Wilson. That's all. So stop lying and state your business plain. The mask dropped. Fine. Here's plain. Hannah Marshall owes me $500. She can pay it in cash or in trade. Her choice. Trade? Hannah's voice shook with rage. You mean selling me to a whorehouse? I mean collecting what's owed. You should have thought about that before you married a thief. I didn't know Thomas stole from you. Don't matter what you knew. Matters what's owed. McCrae's silhouette shifted. Last chance, Hannah. Come out now and nobody else has to die. Go to hell, Jack. Wrong answer. Gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into the cabin walls. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Elijah pulled Hannah down as a round whistled past her head. Stay low, he shouted. He fired back through the window, the rifle's crack deafening in the small space. Outside, someone screamed, Charlie Bates, maybe catching a bullet in the shoulder. The barn, Hannah yelled. They're heading for the barn. Elijah saw movement through the smoke. Ed Wilson running low toward the outbuildings carrying a torch. Son of a bitch is gonna burn us out. He took aim, breathed steady, squeezed the trigger. Wilson dropped like a stone, the torch flying from his hands to sputter out in the snow. One down, Hannah called. She fired twice through the broken window. McCrae circling around back. Elijah moved fast, through the cabin, out the back door, into the bitter cold. He saw McCrae 20 yards away, trying to flank them. Their eyes met. McCrae raised his pistol. So did Elijah. They fired simultaneously. McCrae's bullet took a chunk out of the doorframe. Elijah's bullet took McCrae in the chest. The outlaw staggered, surprise flickering across his scarred face. He tried to raise his gun again, but the strength was bleeding out of him. Should have left well enough. Alone, he rasped. Then he fell face first into the snow and didn't move. Charlie Bates stood frozen in the yard, his wounded shoulder bleeding, his gun dangling from nerveless fingers. He looked at McCrae's body, looked at Wilson's body, looked at Elijah standing with smoke rising from his rifle barrel. "I'm done," Charlie said, dropping his weapon. "I'm done. Don't shoot. Get off my land." "What about—" "Leave the bodies. I'll deal with them. You got 10 seconds before I change my mind about letting you live." Charlie ran for his horse and rode like the devil was chasing him. Silence settled over the homestead. Elijah's ears rang from the gunfire. His hands shook from adrenaline. Hannah appeared in the doorway, her dress splattered with wood splinters, her face white as bone. "Is it over?" "It's over." She walked to McCrae's body and looked down at the man who'd terrorized her for months. No triumph crossed her face, no satisfaction, just exhaustion. "I thought I'd feel something," she said quietly. "But I just feel tired." Elijah moved to her side. "That's what survival feels like. Not glorious, just tired." They stood together in the cold dawn, two people who'd faced death and come out the other side. From beneath the cabin floor, Clara's voice called out, "Papa, is it safe?" "Yeah, baby, it's safe." They pulled the children from the cellar. Clara clung to Hannah, sobbing with relief. Jacob stood straight and silent, but his eyes were older now, the eyes of a child who'd heard men die. "We need to bury them," Elijah said. "I'll help." "Hannah, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." She looked at him steadily. "They came for me. I'll help lay them to rest." So they dug graves in the frozen ground, brutal, exhausting work. By the time they finished, the sun was high and merciless. 2 mounds of disturbed earth marked where Black Jack McCrae and Ed Wilson would spend eternity. "Should we say words?" Hannah asked. "What words would you say?" "I don't know. Something about mercy, maybe. Forgiveness." Elijah thought about that. Sarah would have said everyone deserves grace, even in death. "Your wife sounds like she was a better person than me." "She was a better person than most of us." He pulled off his hat. "Lord, these men made bad choices, did bad things, but they were still your children. Grant them whatever mercy you see fit. Amen." "Amen," Hannah whispered. They walked back to the cabin together. The children had cleaned up the broken glass, swept away the wood splinters. Signs of violence remained, but life was reasserting itself. That night they ate leftover stew. Nobody talked much. The weight of what had happened pressed down on them like physical force. Clara fell asleep at the table. Jacob excused himself to the loft without being asked. Elijah and Hannah sat by the fire, exhausted beyond measure. "Tom Garrett's gonna have questions," Hannah said, "about the bodies." "Let him question. This was self-defense. Even Garrett can't argue with that." "He'll try." "Probably." Elijah stared into the flames. "But I ain't worried about Tom Garrett anymore. We survived McCrae. We can survive whatever comes next." Hannah's hand found his in the darkness between them. "Thank you for fighting, for not giving up on me. Thank you for staying, for being strong enough to stand." They sat like that until the fire burned low. Two people who'd walked through hell and come out holding hands on the other side. Tomorrow would bring new problems. Garrett's questions, the town's judgment, the hard work of rebuilding what violence had damaged. But tonight, they had survived. And sometimes survival was enough. Tom Garrett arrived 3 days later with the sheriff. Elijah saw them coming from half a mile away, 2 riders moving fast through the snow. He was mending fence when they appeared, Hannah beside him holding wire cutters. They'd been working since dawn, trying to repair the damage from the gunfight. "Company," he said quietly. Hannah looked up, her face going pale. "That's Sheriff Morrison with him." "I know." "Elijah, if they arrest you." "They won't." "You don't know that." "I know I defended my home and my family. That's not a crime in this territory." He set down his tools. "Go inside with the kids. Stay there till I call you." "I'm not hiding." "Hannah." "I'm not hiding." She repeated, her voice firm. "This is my fight too." The riders pulled up in the yard. Sheriff Morrison was older than Garrett, maybe 60, with gray whiskers and tired eyes. He'd been enforcing law in Wyoming for 30 years, and it showed in every weathered line of his face. "Barnes," he said, dismounting slowly. "Sheriff?" "Deputy Garrett here tells me you had some trouble." "We had visitors. They came with violence. We defended ourselves." Morrison walked to the grave, studying them silently. "These the visitors?" "Two of them. Third one rode off wounded." "Got names?" "Black Jack McCrae and Ed Wilson. Charlie Bates was the one who lived." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "McCrae. You killed Black Jack McCrae?" "He was trying to burn my cabin with my children inside. What would you have done?" "Same thing." The sheriff crouched by the graves. "Garrett says you're harboring a fugitive." "Garrett's a liar." Tom's face flushed red. "Now you listen here." "No, you listen." Elijah's voice went cold. "You sent McCrae to my homestead. You told him where to find Hannah. That makes you complicit in attempted murder." Morrison's head snapped toward his deputy. "That true?" "I was doing my duty," Garrett said defensively. McCrae had a legitimate claim against the woman. Her husband owed him money. Her husband's dead. Debt transfers to the widow. "Not in this territory, it don't." Morrison stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "You got a personal stake in this, Tom." "No, sir." "Then why'd you involve yourself?" Garrett's jaw worked. "Barnes is violating community standards. An unmarried woman living under his roof." "Is none of your goddamn business." Morrison cut him off. "And it sure as hell ain't worth getting innocent people killed over." "She's not innocent. Her husband is dead and buried." The sheriff's voice cracked like a whip. "And unless you got evidence that Hannah Marshall committed a crime, you got no legal standing to harass her or Barnes." Garrett fell silent, his face twisted with rage and something else, grief maybe, or jealousy. Morrison turned back to Elijah. "I need to hear her side of things. That acceptable to you?" "Hannah," Elijah called. She'd been standing near the cabin listening. Now she approached slowly, her shoulders straight, despite the fear in her eyes. "Ma'am," Morrison said, removing his hat. "I'm Sheriff James Morrison. I need to ask you some questions about what happened here." "Yes, sir." "Tom says Black Jack McCrae came looking for money your husband owed. That accurate?" "Thomas stole $300 from McCrae before he died. McCrae claimed I owed him $500, the original amount plus interest." Hannah's voice was steady. "I told him I had no money. He said I could work off the debt in other ways." "What ways?" "He wanted to sell me to a brothel in Laramie." Morrison's expression darkened. "And when you refused, he tried to burn us out. Mr. Barnes defended his home." "That how you see it?" "That's how it happened, Sheriff. I was here. I saw everything." Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he looked at Elijah. "You got witnesses beyond yourselves." "My children were here. They're 10 and 6 years old. You want to question them, go ahead. But I'm warning you now, you upset my daughter. We're gonna have problems." "I don't interrogate children, Barnes. I'm just trying to establish facts." The sheriff walked a slow circle around the yard, examining the bullet holes in the cabin walls, the burned patch of snow where Wilson's torch had fallen. "Looks like self-defense to me, clear as day." "That your official determination?" Elijah asked. "It is. McCrae was wanted in 3 territories for murder and robbery. Wilson, too. You did the law a favor putting them down." Morrison mounted his horse. "Matters closed far as I'm concerned." "And Garrett?" The sheriff looked at his deputy with disgust. "Tom, you're suspended pending investigation. Turn in your badge." "What? You can't?" "I just did. You compromised an investigation and endangered civilians. You're lucky I don't arrest you." Morrison held out his hand. "Badge, now." Garrett's face went white. His hands trembled as he unpinned the star and handed it over. "Go home," Morrison said. "Stay there. I'll be by tomorrow to get a full statement about your involvement with McCrae." Garrett looked at Hannah with such hatred it made Elijah's skin crawl. "This ain't over." "Yes, it is." Morrison's voice was iron. "And if I hear you've been anywhere near this homestead again, I'll throw you in jail myself. We clear?" Garrett wheeled his horse around and rode off without another word. Morrison watched him go, shaking his head. Known Tom since he was a boy, never thought he'd turn vindictive like that. "He loved my wife," Elijah said quietly. "Still does, I reckon. Seeing Hannah here, it opened old wounds. Love that turns to hate ain't love at all. It's possession." The sheriff tipped his hat to Hannah. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for what you've been through. You have any more trouble, you send word to my office in Cheyenne. I'll come running." "Thank you, Sheriff." Morrison looked at Elijah. "You did right by her, Barnes. Don't let nobody tell you different." He rode away, leaving them standing in the cold yard. Hannah's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the snow, her whole body shaking. I thought he'd arrest you." Elijah crouched beside her. "Morrison's a good man. He saw the truth. But Garrett's got no power now, no badge, no authority. That might make him more dangerous." She was right, and they both knew it. A man with nothing left to lose was capable of anything. "We'll be careful," Elijah said. "Keep watch. But we're not running. This is our home." Hannah looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Our home." "Yeah." The word came easier than he expected. "Ours." She reached for his hand and he pulled her to her feet. They stood together in the trampled snow, two people who'd fought their way through darkness and were finally seeing light. Inside the cabin, Clara watched from the window. She turned to her brother with a smile. "Jacob, I think Papa's gonna marry her." "Don't be stupid." "I'm not stupid. I see the way he looks at her, like Mama used to look at him." Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then, "Would that be bad if he married her? Would it bother you?" "Mama's dead. She ain't coming back." The boy's voice cracked. "Maybe it's okay to let someone else in." Clara hugged him tight. "You're getting wise in your old age." "I'm 10. Ancient." Despite everything, Jacob smiled. Outside, Elijah and Hannah stood close together, speaking in low voices. They didn't know the children were watching. Didn't know that their careful dance around grief and hope and fear was visible to everyone. Sometimes the heart heals without permission. Sometimes love sneaks in through the cracks before you're ready. Sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. The town's reaction came swift and brutal. Within a week, word spread about the gunfight, about McCrae's death, about Hannah Marshall still living under Elijah Barnes's roof despite the scandal. Silas Crane led the charge. He stood on the steps of his general store and preached hellfire to anyone who'd listen. "That woman brought death to our community," he shouted. "First her outlaw husband, now Blackjack McCrae. How many men have to die before we admit she's cursed?" Martha Hayes, the old widow who'd defended Hannah at the town meeting, confronted him directly. "Cursed or convenient scapegoat for your own failings? What's that supposed to mean?" "Means everyone knows you sold guns to the Cheyenne during the raids of '72. Means you got blood on your hands same as anyone." Martha's voice carried across the crowded street. "Difference is, Hannah Marshall never pretended to be righteous." Crane's face went purple. "You got no proof of that." "I got a letter from my dead husband's things. He was keeping records, Silas, in case the army ever came asking questions." She smiled coldly. "Want me to dig it up?" The crowd murmured. Crane's support wavered, but Reverend Stone wasn't finished. He took up the crusade with religious fervor, preaching sermons about women who led men astray, about the sins of the flesh, about the corruption that came from harboring wickedness. "Elijah Barnes has allowed evil into his home," Stone thundered from the pulpit. "And mark my words, he will reap what he has sown." Some people listened. Some people always listened when a man in authority spoke with certainty. But others remembered Elijah pulling Hannah from the mud, remembered his courage in the face of McCrae's violence, and they started asking questions. "Why are we punishing a woman for surviving?" someone asked at the saloon. "Barnes defended his home," another said. "That's what any of us would do." "Maybe we've been too quick to judge," a third voice added. The town fractured down the middle, half believing Hannah was a curse, half believing she'd been wronged. And in that fracture, something shifted. Elijah felt it when he rode into Fort Bridger for supplies 2 weeks after the shooting. Some people crossed the street to avoid him. Others nodded respectfully. A few even stopped to shake his hand. "You did right," one old rancher said. "Taking in that woman, standing up to McCrae." "Wasn't about right or wrong," Elijah replied. "Was about not letting fear make my decisions. Still, took courage." The rancher spat tobacco juice. "More'n most of us got." At Crane's store, the storekeeper refused to serve him. "Your money's no good here, Barnes." "Then I'll take my business elsewhere." "There ain't nowhere else." "There's Jackson's trading post in Bridger Valley. 20 miles further, but worth it to avoid your sanctimonious horse shit." Elijah turned to leave. Behind him, several other customers followed. "Where are you going?" Crane sputtered. "With him," Martha Hayes said. "I'm tired of giving money to a hypocrite." By the time Elijah reached his wagon, 6 people had joined his exodus. They formed a small caravan, riding together to Jackson's post. Word got back to Crane within hours. He'd lost a third of his regular customers in a single morning. The merchant sat alone in his empty store and realized too late that righteousness without mercy was just another word for cruelty. Hannah felt the shift too, but it brought no comfort. She woke one night screaming, trapped in a dream, where Thomas stood on the gallows and pointed at her. "Your fault," he said. "All of it. Your fault." Elijah was there, instantly climbing the ladder to the loft. "Hannah, wake up. You're safe." She sobbed against his chest, her whole body shaking. Jacob and Clara watched from their beds, silent and worried. "I can't stop seeing him," Hannah gasped. "Every time I close my eyes, he's there, blaming me, hating me. He made his own choices. But if I'd been a better wife—" "Stop." Elijah gripped her shoulders. "Listen to me. Thomas Marshall chose crime. He chose violence. Those were his decisions, not yours. You don't carry his guilt." "Then why does it feel like I do?" "Because you're human. Because grief and guilt sound the same in the dark." He smoothed her hair back gently. "But come morning, you'll remember the truth. You survived. That's not a sin." Hannah clung to him, drawing strength from his steadiness. Slowly, her breathing calmed. Her tears dried. "Papa?" Clara's small voice cut through the darkness. "Can Mrs. Hannah sleep with us, so she won't be scared?" Elijah looked at Hannah. She nodded, exhausted. "Yeah, baby, she can sleep with you." Clara scooted over, making room. Hannah crawled between the 2 children, and they curled around her like protective shields. Within minutes, all 3 were asleep. Elijah climbed down the ladder and sat by the dying fire. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the intensity of what he'd felt holding Hannah, protective and fierce, and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. He'd loved Sarah, loved her with the uncomplicated devotion of youth. But Sarah had been easy to love, gentle, kind, unbroken. Hannah was different, broken and fierce and complicated. Loving her would be hard, would require patience and courage and the willingness to walk through fire. But maybe that's what made it real. Maybe easy love was just the practice round for the kind that mattered. Spring came late, but inevitable. Snow melted into rushing streams. The ground thawed. Birds returned, filling the air with song. And with the warming weather came decisions that couldn't be postponed. Elijah found Hannah in the garden, turning soil for planting. She'd shed her shawl in the weak sunshine, her sleeves rolled up dirt under her fingernails. "We need to talk," he said. She looked up, squinting against the light. "About what?" "About you staying." Her expression shuddered. "You want me to leave?" "No. Opposite." He crouched beside her. "I want to make this official. Legal." "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm asking you to marry me." Hannah's hands stilled on the spade. "You don't have to do that." "I know. People are already talking. Making it legal won't change their minds. I'm not asking because of what people think. I'm asking because—" He stopped, took a breath. "I'm asking because I want you here. Not as help, not as charity, as my wife." "Elijah." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You don't love me." "Not like I loved Sarah, that's true." He met her eyes. "But I respect you. I admire your strength. I trust you with my children. And I think given time I could love you in a different way. A deeper way." "That's not enough." "Isn't it? Most marriages start with less." Hannah stood brushing dirt from her hands. "You deserve better than settling. And you deserve better than thinking you're second choice." Elijah rose to face her. "Hannah, look at me." She did reluctantly. "Sarah's dead. I loved her. I'll always love her. But she's gone and I'm still here. Still breathing. Still trying to build a life for my kids." He took her hand. "You're not replacing her. You're writing a new chapter, and I want you in it." "What if I fail? What if I can't be what you need? What if you can?" He smiled. "What if we're both terrified and we do it anyway?" Hannah searched his face for a long time. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay. Okay. Yes. I'll marry you." Relief and joy and terror washed over him in equal measure. He pulled her close, holding her tight. She clung to him, her face pressed against his chest. "When?" she asked. "Soon as we can arrange it. Before I lose my nerve." She laughed, a real laugh full of surprise and hope. "You're not the only one with cold feet." "Then we'll be scared together." They stood in the warming garden, two damaged people choosing to be brave, choosing to believe that sometimes broken pieces fit together better than whole ones ever could. From the cabin, Jacob watched through the window. He turned to his sister. "Papa asked her." And she said yes. Clara whooped with joy, doing a little dance. Jacob tried to look unaffected, but a smile tugged at his lips. "Mama would have liked her," he said quietly. "Yeah." Clara hugged him. "She would have." They married on a Thursday in late April. Sheriff Morrison performed the ceremony in the yard of the homestead with Martha Hayes and her husband as witnesses. Clara wore wildflowers in her hair. Jacob stood solemn and proud in his only good shirt. Hannah wore a simple dress borrowed from Martha, mended by her own hands. She looked beautiful in the way of women who'd survived too much and were finally allowing themselves to hope. Elijah wore his dead father's suit, too tight in the shoulders, but respectable. He'd shaved that morning, nicking himself twice in his nervousness. "Dearly beloved," Morrison began, then stopped. "Actually, I'm just going to speak plain. Elijah, you take this woman as your lawful wife." "I do." "Hannah, you take this man as your lawful husband." She looked at Elijah, really looked at him, saw the scars and the grief and the stubborn courage that had pulled her from the mud and given her a chance at life. "I do." Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife." Morrison grinned. "You can kiss her now if you're so inclined." Elijah leaned in slowly, giving Hannah time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Their lips met a gentle, tentative kiss that spoke of new beginnings and fragile trust. Clara applauded. Jacob rolled his eyes but smiled. Martha dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Congratulations," Morrison said. "You're officially the most controversial couple in Fort Bridger." "We're aiming for most controversial in the whole territory," Elijah replied. "Give it time, you'll get there." They celebrated with a simple meal, roasted chicken biscuits, fresh butter. Martha had brought a cake slightly lopsided but sweet. They ate and laughed, and for a few hours the weight of the past lifted. As evening fell, the guests departed. Jacob and Clara retreated to the loft, giving the newlyweds privacy. Elijah and Hannah stood in the cabin, suddenly awkward. "I can sleep by the fire," Elijah offered, "if you'd prefer." "No." Hannah's voice was firm. "We're married. Properly married. I'm not afraid of you, Elijah." "I'm a little afraid of you," she smiled. "Good. Keeps things interesting." They lay down together in the bed Elijah had built years ago for Sarah. It should have felt wrong, a betrayal of memory. But it didn't. It felt like coming home. Hannah rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me, when everyone else looked away." "Thank you for staying, when running would have been easier." They fell asleep like that, two people who'd fought their way through darkness and finally found light. Outside, the wind whispered through new grass. Stars burned cold and bright, and on a hill overlooking the valley, two graves stood silent. Sarah Barnes and Thomas Marshall. Their stories ended, their survivors free to write new ones. The past didn't disappear. It never did. But it loosened its grip enough to let the future in. And sometimes that was all anyone could ask. But peace never lasted long in Wyoming territory. Tom Garrett sat in his empty house drinking whiskey and nursing his hatred. He'd lost his badge, lost his purpose, lost everything he'd built. And it was all because of Elijah Barnes. He stared at the letter in his hand, the one he'd been writing and rewriting for 3 days. Finally, he made his decision. He sealed the envelope and addressed it carefully to the territorial governor, Cheyenne, Wyoming. Inside, he detailed every perceived crime Elijah had committed: harboring a fugitive, killing McCrae without due process, corrupting community standards. Most of it was lies, but Garrett didn't care anymore. If he couldn't have justice, he'd settle for revenge. He mailed the letter at dawn and waited for the consequences to rain down. 3 weeks of married life passed like a dream Elijah was afraid to wake from. Hannah transformed the cabin without erasing Sarah's memory. She hung new curtains beside the old quilt. She taught Clara to braid hair, while Jacob learned to trust her with his secrets. At night, she and Elijah lay together in the darkness, talking about futures that once seemed impossible. "I'm pregnant," she said one morning, her voice steady but her hands trembling. Elijah stopped mid-bite, his fork suspended over breakfast. "You sure?" 3 weeks late. Sick every morning." She looked at him with fear and hope warring in her eyes. "Are you angry?" "Angry?" He set down his fork carefully. "Hannah, I'm terrified. After what happened with Sarah." "I know. I'm scared too." Jacob and Clara had frozen at the table listening. "Does this mean we're getting a brother or sister?" Clara asked. "Looks like," Hannah said. The girl launched herself at Hannah, hugging her tight. Jacob remained seated, his young face working through complicated emotions. "You okay, son?" Elijah asked. "Will you die?" Jacob's voice cracked. "Like Mama did." Hannah knelt before him, taking his hands. "I can't promise I won't. Nobody can promise that. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay alive. For you and Clara and this baby and your father." That's not good enough. It's all I got. Jacob's eyes filled with tears. I don't want another grave on the hill. Neither do I. Hannah pulled him close. Neither do I, sweetheart. Elijah watched his broken family trying to piece itself back together, and his chest ached with love and fear in equal measure. That afternoon, Sheriff Morrison arrived with 2 territorial marshals. Elijah was splitting wood when they rode up, and the look on Morrison's face told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't a social call. Elijah, Morrison said heavily, these are Marshals Hawkins and Reed. They got some questions for you. Marshal Hawkins was tall and thin with a gray beard and hard eyes. Reed was younger, maybe 30, with a scar across his cheek and a gun that looked well used. Mr. Barnes, Hawkins said, we're here regarding complaints filed with the territorial governor. Serious complaints about your conduct. What conduct? Harboring a known criminal's widow, killing 2 men without due process, operating outside territorial law. Hawkins pulled out a folded document. You're ordered to appear before a territorial magistrate in Cheyenne within 10 days to answer these charges. Hannah appeared in the doorway, her face pale. This is because of me. Ma'am, you need to come too. You're listed as a material witness. Witness to what? Elijah demanded. I defended my home against armed outlaws. Morrison himself ruled it self-defense. Sheriff Morrison's ruling is being reviewed. Reed spoke for the first time, his voice flat. Someone with authority higher than his disagrees with the assessment. Who? Elijah asked. Who filed these complaints? Hawkins glanced at his papers. Former Deputy Tom Garrett. He's made detailed accusations of misconduct. Garrett's a liar. He's the one who sent McCrae to my homestead in the first place. That'll be for the magistrate to decide. Hawkins folded the papers. You got 10 days, Barnes. Don't make us come back with arrest warrants. They rode away, leaving silence like smoke in their wake. Morrison dismounted, his face grim. This is bad, Elijah. How bad? The territorial governor is ambitious. He's running for Congress next year, wants to prove Wyoming's civilized and law-abiding. Morrison spat in the dirt. Using your case to show he's tough on frontier violence. I was protecting my family. I know that. You know that. But politicians don't care about truth. They care about perception. Hannah stepped forward, her voice shaking. What happens if he's found guilty? Depends on the charges. Could be fines. Could be prison time. Morrison looked at Elijah. Could be hanging. Clara gasped from the window. Jacob's face went white. They can't hang Papa, Clara cried. He didn't do anything wrong. Sweetheart, it'll be okay, Hannah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Morrison pulled Elijah aside. You need a lawyer, a good one. I can't afford a lawyer. Then you better pray the magistrate believes your story, because Garrett's going to testify against you, and he's going to lie through his teeth. After Morrison left, Elijah gathered his family in the cabin. Hannah held Clara while Jacob stood rigid beside his father. I have to go to Cheyenne, Elijah said. Answer these charges. We're coming with you, Hannah said immediately. No, it's a week's journey each way. You're pregnant. The kids need stability. The kids need their father. Hannah's voice broke. And I need my husband. We're coming. Hannah, don't you dare leave us behind. Not now, not when... She couldn't finish. Tears streamed down her face. Elijah looked at his children. Clara was crying. Jacob was trying not to. All right, he said quietly. We go together. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Elijah sold 2 horses to pay for supplies and lodging. Hannah packed clothing and food. Jacob cleaned the rifles. Clara clung to them all, terrified of losing another parent. The night before they left, Elijah stood on the hill overlooking Sarah's grave. I'm sorry, he whispered. Sorry I'm bringing trouble to our kids. Sorry I'm risking everything for a woman you never met. He swallowed hard. But I love her, Sarah. Different than I loved you, but just as real. And I need you to be okay with that." The wind stirred the grass. Somewhere, a coyote howled. Elijah took the silence as answer enough. They reached Cheyenne on the 6th day, exhausted and frightened. The territorial capital was bigger than Fort Bridger, real buildings of brick and stone, streets crowded with wagons and horses, people everywhere. Progress in all its loud, dirty glory. They found lodging at a modest inn near the courthouse. 2 rooms, one for Elijah and Hannah, one for the children. It cost more than Elijah wanted to spend, but comfort mattered when your world was falling apart. That evening, a lawyer named Samuel Pritchard came to see them. He was young, maybe 28, with earnest eyes and ink-stained fingers. "Sheriff Morrison sent word you needed representation," Pritchard said. "I'm willing to take your case pro bono." "Why?" Elijah asked suspiciously. "Because I read Garrett's complaint. It's full of lies and vindictiveness. I don't like seeing innocent people railroaded for political gain. You think we can win? I think we have a chance. If you're honest with me." Pritchard looked at Hannah. "Mrs. Barnes, I need to know everything about your first husband. Every detail, no matter how ugly." Hannah told him. All of it. The drought that broke Thomas, the drinking, the gambling, the night he came home with blood on his hands and $300 he couldn't explain, the arrest, the trial, the hanging. Pritchard took notes, his expression never changing. When she finished, he looked up. "The prosecution will paint you as a woman who drove her husband to crime, who seduced Mr. Barnes into protecting you from justice. Can you handle that? I've been called worse. But can you handle it in a courtroom in front of strangers who want to believe the worst about you?" Hannah's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Good." Pritchard turned to Elijah. "And you? They'll say you're obsessed, that you killed McCrae out of some misguided knight-errant fantasy rather than legitimate self-defense. How do you respond?" "I respond that McCrae came to my home with guns and torches, that he threatened to burn my children alive, that I did what any father would do, even if it meant killing 2 men. Even then." Pritchard nodded slowly. "All right. The hearing's tomorrow at 9. Magistrate Colton presiding. He's fair but strict. Follows the letter of the law." "Will Garrett be there?" Hannah asked. "He'll testify. So will Sheriff Morrison. Possibly others from Fort Bridger." Pritchard gathered his papers. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult." After he left, Elijah and Hannah lay awake in the strange bed, listening to the city sounds outside. "What if they take you away?" Hannah whispered. "They won't. But if they do, then you raise our children. You keep the homestead. You live." He turned to face her. "You survive, Hannah. That's what you're good at." "I don't want to survive without you." "You will if you have to. Because you're stronger than you think." She pressed her face against his chest, and he held her while she cried. Not for herself, but for the life they'd just started building. The future that might be ripped away. In the next room, Jacob lay awake too, listening through the thin walls. He heard his stepmother crying. Heard his father's low, comforting voice. "Clara," he whispered. "You asleep?" "No." "You scared?" "Yeah. Me too." He reached across the narrow space between their beds and found her hand. "But we gotta be brave. For Papa and Hannah. What if the judge is mean? What if he doesn't believe them? Then we'll figure something out. We're Barnes. We don't quit." Clara squeezed his hand tight. "I love you, Jacob." "Love you too, Squirt." They fell asleep like that, 2 children holding on to each other in the darkness, praying for a tomorrow that didn't hurt. The courtroom was smaller than Elijah expected. Wooden benches for spectators, a raised platform for the magistrate, a simple table for the accused. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, making dust motes dance in the air. Magistrate Colton entered at exactly 9 o'clock. He was 60, maybe older, with white hair and a face carved from granite. He moved slowly, but with authority. "All rise," the bailiff called. They stood. Colton took his seat and surveyed the room with eyes that missed nothing. "We're here to review complaints filed by Thomas Garrett against Elijah Barnes," Colton said. "Mr. Garrett, you may present your case." Garrett stood looking thinner than Elijah remembered, hollow-eyed, broken. "Your Honor, on January 15th of this year, Elijah Barnes took into his home one Hannah Marshall, the widow of a known criminal. He did so despite community objections and moral concerns." "Objection," Pritchard said. "There's no law against offering employment to a widow." Sustained. Mr. Garrett stick to legal violations, not moral judgments. Garrett's jaw clenched. On January 28th, Blackjack McCrae came to Barnes's homestead seeking payment of a debt owed by Mrs. Marshall's late husband. Barnes murdered McCrae and Edward Wilson in cold blood. "It was self-defense," Hannah burst out. The gavel cracked. "Mrs. Barnes, you'll have your chance to speak. Right now, you're silent." She subsided, her face flushed. Garrett continued. "Barnes then intimidated me in my official capacity as deputy, threatened violence against citizens of Fort Bridger, and generally operated outside the law." "You got evidence?" Colton asked. "Witness testimony, Your Honor." "Then call your witnesses." Over the next 2 hours, Garrett called Silas Crane, who testified that Elijah had threatened him, called Reverend Stone, who testified about moral decay and godlessness, called 3 townspeople who swore they'd seen Elijah acting violently. All of it was exaggeration or outright lies, but it sounded convincing. Then Pritchard stood. "Your Honor, I call Sheriff James Morrison." Morrison took the stand, his weathered face serious. "Sheriff, you investigated the shooting at the Barnes homestead. What did you find?" "Clear evidence of self-defense. McCrae and his men came armed and with violent intent. Barnes protected his family." "Did you find any evidence that Mr. Barnes acted improperly?" "None. He did what any man would do." "And Deputy Garrett's claim that Barnes threatened citizens?" "I investigated those claims, found them baseless. In fact, I found evidence that Garrett himself sent McCrae to the Barnes homestead." Morrison looked at the magistrate. "That's why I suspended him." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Garrett's face went red. "That's a lie," he shouted. The gavel cracked again. "Mr. Garrett, sit down and be quiet." Pritchard smiled slightly. No further questions. Colton looked at Garrett. "Do you have rebuttal?" "Sheriff Morrison is biased in Barnes's favor. I asked for rebuttal, not accusations." Colton's voice was cold. "Sit down." Pritchard called Hannah next. She walked to the stand with her head high despite the trembling in her hands. The oath was sworn. The questioning began. "Mrs. Barnes, please tell the court what happened on January 28th." Hannah told the story. Clear. Unflinching. She described McCrae's threats. The gunfire. The terror of hiding her children while bullets flew. "And your husband?" Pritchard asked. "How did he respond?" "He defended us, not because he wanted to kill, but because he had no choice." "Objection," Garrett interrupted. "She's not qualified to speak to Mr. Barnes's motivations." "She's his wife," Pritchard said dryly. "I'd say she's qualified." "Overruled," Colton said. "Continue, Mrs. Barnes." Hannah looked directly at the magistrate. "My first husband became a criminal because he lost hope, because the world beat him down until there was nothing left but bitterness. Elijah Barnes is the opposite. He found me when I'd lost everything, when the whole world had given up on me. He gave me hope, gave me a future." Her voice broke. "If you take him away, you're not punishing a criminal. You're destroying the only good man I've ever known." Silence filled the courtroom. Colton studied her for a long moment. "Thank you, Mrs. Barnes. You may step down." Finally, Pritchard called Elijah. "Mr. Barnes, why did you take Mrs. Marshall into your home?" Because it was the right thing to do. Even knowing it would cause you problems. Doing right usually causes problems. Doesn't make it less right. When McCrae came to your homestead, what went through your mind? Elijah closed his eyes, remembering. Terror. Not for myself. For my kids. For Hannah. I thought about my wife dying while I was gone. About failing again. About not being there when it mattered. He opened his eyes. So I stood my ground. Because this time, I could be there. This time, I could protect what mattered. Did you want to kill those men? No. But you did it anyway. I did what I had to do, and I'd do it again. Even knowing you might hang for it. Even then. Pritchard nodded. No further questions. Garrett stood to cross-examine his face, twisted with hatred. You loved Sarah Barnes, didn't you? Of course, she was my wife. And yet here you are, months after her death, married to another woman. Convenient. Objection, Pritchard shouted. Relevance. I'm establishing character. Your Honor, showing that Barnes moves from woman to woman without regard for... Sit down, Mr. Garrett. Colton's voice was ice. This isn't a morality hearing. Either ask relevant questions or rest your case. Garrett stood there, breathing hard, his hands clenched. Finally, he said, no further questions. Colton looked at both parties. Closing arguments. Garrett went first, his voice passionate. Your Honor, this case isn't about self-defense. It's about a man who thinks he's above the law, who takes in criminals' widows' kills without hesitation and expects no consequences. If we allow this behavior, we're saying might makes right. We're saying frontier justice trumps territorial law. Pritchard stood. Your Honor, Mr. Garrett has it backward. This case is exactly about the law that says a man can defend his home, the law that says a woman isn't responsible for her husband's crimes, the law that protects the innocent from persecution. He gestured to Elijah. This man did nothing wrong. He survived an attack, protected his family, and tried to build a life. If we punish him for that, we're not upholding the law, we're perverting it. Colton was silent for a long time. Then he spoke. I've heard enough. This court finds that Elijah Barnes acted in legitimate self-defense against an armed assault. All charges are dismissed. He looked at Garrett. Mr. Garrett, your complaints are without merit and appear motivated by personal animus rather than legal concern. I'm recommending formal censure of your conduct. Relief crashed over Elijah like a wave. Hannah sobbed. Clara and Jacob, sitting in the back, hugged each other. But Garrett wasn't finished. He stood, his face purple with rage. This is a travesty. Barnes murdered 2 men, and you're letting him walk free. Sit down, Mr. Garrett. No, I won't be silent while in justice. Bailiff, escort Mr. Garrett from the courtroom. You're all corrupt. All of you. Garrett struggled as the bailiff grabbed him. He stole everything from me. My badge, my purpose, the woman I... He stopped. Realized what he'd almost said. Morrison, sitting in the front row, closed his eyes in disgust. The woman you... What, Tom? Colton asked quietly. Garrett's shoulders slumped. All the fight drained out of him. Nothing. I got nothing left. They led him away, and the courtroom slowly emptied. Elijah stood on shaking legs. Hannah ran to him, and he caught her in his arms. The children rushed over, and they stood together in a tight knot of relief and tears. It's over, Hannah whispered. It's really over. Yeah. Elijah held his family close. It's over. But as they left the courthouse, Elijah caught sight of Garrett standing across the street watching them. The man's face was empty. Dead. And Elijah knew with cold certainty that it wasn't over at all. Some men, when they lost everything, just gave up. Others became dangerous. They stayed in Cheyenne one more night, celebrating with a real restaurant dinner. Steak and potatoes and pie for dessert. The kids ate until they couldn't move. Hannah smiled more than Elijah had ever seen. For one evening, they were just a normal family. No trials, no threats, no darkness. The next morning, they started the journey home. It would take a week, maybe more, with spring rains making the roads difficult, but they were going home. Together. On the third day, they stopped at a creek to water the horses. Jacob and Clara played by the water, while Elijah and Hannah sat on a fallen log holding hands. "I've been thinking," Hannah said, "about names. For the baby. If it's a girl, I want to name her Sarah, if that's all right with you." Elijah's throat tightened. "Hannah, you don't have to." "I want to. She gave you life, gave Jacob and Clara life. It's only right that we honor her. And if it's a boy, whatever you want." He thought about his father, dead 15 years now. A hard man, but fair. "Daniel, after my pa." "Daniel or Sarah Barnes." Hannah smiled. "I like it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. The sun was warm. Birds sang. The world felt safe. Then Elijah saw movement in the trees. He was on his feet instantly, hand going to his gun. "Jacob, Clara, get behind the wagon, now." They moved without question, running to their father. Hannah grabbed the rifle from the wagon bed. A figure emerged from the woods. Not Garrett, someone else. "Easy there, friend," the man called. "I'm unarmed." He was young, maybe 20, wearing dusty traveling clothes. He held his hands high, showing empty palms. "Who are you?" Elijah demanded. "Name's Peter Garrett, Tom's younger brother." He stepped closer slowly. "I'm not here to cause trouble, just wanted to talk." "About what?" "About Tom." Peter's face was haggard. "He's gone. Left Cheyenne 3 days ago. Didn't tell nobody where he was going." "Why should I care?" "Because he's planning something. I know my brother. He's not the type to let go. And after what happened at the trial..." Peter stopped. "I'm worried he's going to do something stupid, something that can't be undone." Hannah moved closer to Elijah. "What do you want from us?" "Just wanted to warn you. Keep your eyes open. Tom's not right in the head anymore." Peter backed away. "I loved my brother once. But the man he's become, I don't recognize him. Just thought you should know." He disappeared back into the trees before Elijah could respond. They packed up quickly and rode hard for the rest of the day, pushing the horses faster than was wise. By nightfall, they were exhausted, but closer to home. "You think he's telling the truth?" Hannah asked as they made camp. "Yeah, I do." "So what do we do?" "We get home, we fortify, and we wait." Because Tom Garrett was out there somewhere nursing his grievances, planning his revenge. And when he came, and Elijah knew he would come, one of them wouldn't walk away. They reached the homestead on the 6th day, just as the sun was setting behind the mountains. Everything looked exactly as they'd left it, the cabin, the barn, the fences stretching toward the tree line. But something felt wrong. Elijah couldn't name it, just knew it in his bones. "Stay in the wagon," he told Hannah. "Elijah, stay with the kids. I'm checking the cabin first." He dismounted slowly, rifle in hand, and approached the door. It hung slightly open. He'd locked it before they left. Inside the cabin had been ransacked, furniture overturned, dishes smashed, Sarah's quilt torn from the wall and shredded on the floor. "No," Elijah breathed. He checked every corner. Nobody was there, but the message was clear. Tom Garrett had been here. Hannah appeared in the doorway despite his orders, took one look at the destruction, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God. He's sending a message." "What message?" "That he can get to us anytime he wants." Elijah picked up a piece of the ruined quilt, his hands shaking with rage. "That we're not safe. Never will be." Jacob and Clara crowded in behind Hannah. Clara started crying when she saw her mother's quilt destroyed. Jacob's young face went hard as stone. "We should leave," Hannah said. Start over somewhere else, somewhere Garrett can't find us. He'll find us anywhere. Men like him don't quit. Elijah set down his rifle, carefully fighting the urge to put his fist through the wall. Running just gives him power. Then what do? We clean up, we rebuild, and we prepare for when he comes back. They worked through the night, putting the cabin back together. What could be salvaged they saved. What couldn't they burned. By dawn, the place looked almost normal again, but the sense of violation remained. The knowledge that while they'd been in Cheyenne fighting for their lives in court, Garrett had been here destroying their home out of spite. Hannah found Elijah standing by the ashes of the quilt at sunrise. I'm sorry about Sarah's quilt. It's just cloth. No, it's not. It was memory. It was love. She touched his arm. And he destroyed it, because he knew it would hurt you. He succeeded. Then he wins. Elijah looked at her sharply. What? If we let his cruelty break us, he wins. If we let fear make us run, he wins. Hannah's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Sarah made that quilt with love. That love doesn't disappear just because the cloth is gone. It's still here, in Jacob and Clara, in this homestead, in us. She was right, and Elijah knew it, but knowing didn't make the anger hurt less. I want to kill him, he admitted quietly. Not in self-defense, not to protect anyone, just because I want him to hurt like he's hurt us. I know. That make me a bad man. It makes you human. Hannah leaned against him. But you're better than your anger. Better than him. Don't let him drag you down to his level. Elijah pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. How'd you get so wise? Married a man who believed I was worth saving. Learned some things from him. They stood together as the sun rose higher, two people choosing courage over fear, hope over hatred. Behind them, Jacob watched from the window. He'd heard every word, and he made a decision of his own. The days that followed were tense. Every sound made Elijah reach for his gun. Every shadow looked like a threat. He checked the perimeter 3 times a day, looking for signs of Garrett's return. Hannah grew rounder with pregnancy, her belly swelling with new life, even as danger circled closer. She refused to be afraid, planted a garden, taught Clara her letters, helped Jacob with his arithmetic. You're acting like everything's normal, Elijah said one afternoon, watching her hanging laundry. It is normal. We're living our lives. That's what people do. People also prepare for trouble. I am prepared. I got a loaded pistol in my apron pocket and a knife in my boot. But I'm not going to stop living just because a broken man wants me scared. She hung another sheet. Fear's a choice, Elijah. I'm choosing different. He loved her so much in that moment it physically hurt. That night, Sheriff Morrison rode in with news. Found Garrett. Elijah was on his feet instantly. Where? Cave system about 10 miles north. Peter tracked him there. He's been camping out watching the homestead through a spyglass. For how long? Near as we can tell, about a week, maybe longer. Morrison's face was grim. He's not eating much, not sleeping. Peter says he's talking to himself, having conversations with people who ain't there. He's losing his mind. Lost it already, probably. But that makes him more dangerous, not less. Man with nothing to lose will do things a sane man wouldn't consider. So what do? I want to bring him in. Get him help, maybe. Lock him up before he hurts himself or someone else. Morrison looked at Elijah steadily. But I need your help. He knows me, knows my deputies, but he might listen to you. Why would he listen to me? I'm the one he hates. Because you're the one he wants. You go up there, you can talk to him, get him to surrender peaceful. Morrison paused. Or you can end this the other way. I won't judge either choice. Hannah appeared in the doorway. Don't go. I have to. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You're pregnant. You're staying here where it's safe. Nowhere safe until this is finished. She met his eyes. And maybe I'm the one who should go. He doesn't hate me. He hates you because of me. Maybe if I talk to him. No. Elijah's voice was final. I won't risk you or our baby. This is between me and Garrett. Nothing about this is just between you two. It stopped being personal the minute he broke into our home. Hannah's hands clenched. But fine, go. Do what men do, fight and bleed and call it honor. Just come back alive, Elijah Barnes. You hear me? Come back alive. He kissed her hard-tasting salt from her tears. I promise. You can't promise that. I'm promising anyway. He gathered his rifle, checked his pistol pulled on his coat. Jacob stood at the door, face solemn. Papa, take me with you. No. I can shoot. I can help. You can help by staying here and protecting your sister and Hannah. That's your job. Elijah gripped the boy's shoulder. You're the man of the house while I'm gone. Can you handle that? Jacob's chin lifted. Yes, sir. Good boy. Elijah mounted his horse and rode into the darkness with Morrison. Behind them, Hannah stood in the doorway with Clara tucked under her arm, watching until they disappeared. He'll be okay, Clara said uncertainly. Right. Hannah didn't answer, just held the girl tighter and prayed to a God she wasn't sure was listening. The cave system was a black mouth in the mountainside, hidden behind a stand of pine trees. Morrison and Elijah dismounted 100 yards away and approached on foot. The sheriff carried a torch. Elijah carried his rifle. Tom Garrett, Morrison called. It's Sheriff Morrison. I'm coming in to talk. I'm not armed. I just want to talk. Silence answered. They moved forward slowly. The cave entrance yawned before them, darkness absolute. Tom, please. Your brother's worried about you. We all are. Let us help. Movement in the darkness. Then Garrett's voice raw and broken. Go away, Jim. Can't do that, son. I ain't your son. I ain't nobody's son. A harsh laugh echoed from the cave. I'm nothing. Less than nothing. That's not true. Isn't it? Garrett emerged slowly from the shadows. He looked like hell-gaunt, filthy eyes wild. He held a pistol loosely in one hand. I lost my badge, my dignity, my purpose, all because of him. His gaze locked on Elijah. You, Garrett spat. You took everything from me. I didn't take anything. Elijah said quietly. You lost it yourself. Liar, Sarah was supposed to be mine. We grew up together. I loved her first, but she chose you. And then when she died, when I finally thought... He stopped breathing hard. You were supposed to be alone, miserable, like me. But you found her, found Hannah, found happiness while I got nothing. Tom, Sarah made her choice 20 years ago. That's not Elijah's fault. Everything's his fault. He's got everything I ever wanted. Garrett raised the pistol. A family, a home, love. And I got caves and darkness and voices that won't shut up. Elijah stepped forward slowly. Tom, I'm sorry. Sorry you're hurting. Sorry life didn't work out the way you wanted. But killing me won't fix it. Won't bring Sarah back. Won't make you happy. Maybe not, but it'll make you hurt like I hurt. Garrett's finger tightened on the trigger. And maybe that's enough. What about your brother Peter loves you, came looking for you, wants to help? Peter's better off without me. Everyone is. That's the pain, talking not truth. You don't know anything about my pain. Garrett's voice cracked. You lost your wife and found another. I lost mine before I ever had her, and there's no replacement, no second chance. Just emptiness forever. Morrison moved slightly to the left, trying to flank him. Garrett swung the gun toward him. Don't move, Jim. I don't want to hurt you, but I will. Easy, Tom. Easy. Nothing's easy. Nothing's ever been easy. Garrett looked at Elijah again. You know what the worst part is? I'm glad Sarah's dead. Glad she didn't have to see what I became. How low I sank. She would have forgiven you. I don't want forgiveness. I want oblivion. He raised the gun to his own head. Tom, no, Morrison shouted. But Garrett wasn't listening anymore. His eyes had gone distant, seeing something only he could see. I'm sorry, Sarah, he whispered. Sorry I wasn't enough. Elijah lunged forward, grabbing for the gun. They struggled. The pistol went off deafening in the enclosed space. Both men fell. Morrison rushed over, torch held high. Blood spread across Garrett's shirt. He'd been shot in the shoulder, not fatal, but serious. Get pressure on that wound, Morrison barked. Elijah tore off his shirt, wadding it against the injury. Garrett's eyes fluttered open, focused on him. Why'd you stop me? His voice was barely a whisper. Because I know what it's like to want to die. And I know someone stopped me once when it mattered. Elijah pressed harder on the wound. You're not dying today, Tom. Not on my watch. I hate you. I know. But you saved me anyway. Yeah. Tears tracked through the dirt on Garrett's face. Why? Because that's what Sarah would have done. And I'm trying to be the man she believed I was. They got Garrett onto a horse and rode hard for Fort Bridger. The doctor worked through the night, removing the bullet, stitching the wound. By dawn, Garrett was stable, but weak. Peter sat by his brother's bedside, holding his hand. Thank you, he said to Elijah, for not letting him die. He's sick, not evil. There's a difference. What'll happen to him now? That's up to the magistrate. But I'll testify he needs help, not punishment. Elijah looked at the broken man on the bed. He lost his way. Maybe he can find it again. Morrison walked Elijah outside. The sun was rising, painting the sky gold and red. You're a better man than I am, the sheriff said. I might have let him pull that trigger. Some days I think I should have. Elijah climbed onto his horse. But then I remember Hannah telling me that fear's a choice, so's mercy. I chose mercy. Your wife's a wise woman. Don't I know it? Elijah rode home as fast as his exhausted horse could carry him. The homestead appeared on the horizon, smoke rising from the chimney laundry flapping in the breeze. Normal. Safe. Home. Hannah saw him coming and ran from the cabin, her pregnant belly swaying. He caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground. You came back, she sobbed. You came back. Told you I would. Is Garrett alive? Wounded but alive. He'll face consequences, but he'll live. Elijah set her down gently. It's over, Hannah. Really over this time. She searched his face. You're sure? I'm sure. Jacob and Clara burst from the cabin, throwing themselves at their father. He held them all, his whole family, the people who made his life worth living. Papa, you're bleeding, Clara said, noticing the bandage on his arm where Garrett's bullet had grazed him. Just a scratch. Scratches don't need bandages. This one does. He kissed the top of her head. But I'm fine. We're all fine. Summer came in waves of heat and golden light. Hannah's belly grew round as the moon. She moved slower now, one hand always pressed to her lower back, but she never stopped working. The garden flourished under her care, tomatoes and beans and squash sprawling in green abundance. Elijah built a cradle from cedar wood, carving wildflowers into the headboard. Jacob helped, learning to use plane and chisel. Clara sewed tiny clothes, her stitches crooked but earnest. News came from Fort Bridger. Tom Garrett had been sent to a hospital in Denver for treatment. Peter visited him regularly, said he was improving, talking less to ghosts, more to doctors. Think he'll ever come back? Hannah asked one evening. Don't know. Don't much care. Elijah rested his hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. He's not my concern anymore. You saved his life. And now I'm done with him. Some people you rescue once and then let go. Can't carry everyone's pain forever. Hannah covered his hand with hers. Wise words from a stubborn cowboy. Learned from a stubborn woman. The town slowly accepted them. Martha Hayes spread the word about what really happened, how Elijah saved Garrett from himself, how Hannah was just a woman trying to survive. Crane's store went out of business when enough people refused to shop there. Reverend Stone preached to smaller and smaller congregations until finally the church board asked him to resign. New people came to Fort Bridger, people who didn't care about old scandals, people who judged by character, not gossip. One morning in late August, Hannah woke Elijah at dawn. "It's time." He was on his feet instantly, panic and joy warring in his chest. "You sure? Baby's coming? I'm sure." They sent Jacob to fetch Martha Hayes, who'd delivered half the babies in the territory. She arrived within the hour, calm and capable. "All right, Hannah girl, let's bring this baby into the world." The labor lasted 8 hours. Elijah paced outside the cabin, useless and terrified. Every cry from within made his heart stop. Every moment of silence was worse. "Papa," Clara said softly. "She'll be okay. Hannah's strong." "Your mama was strong too." "But Hannah's different strong. She survived things Mama never had to." The girl squeezed his hand. "She'll survive this too." Jacob stood silent beside them, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the cabin door. Waiting. Hoping. Praying. Then a baby's cry. Strong and healthy and furious at being born into cold air and bright light. Martha appeared in the doorway, grinning. "You got a daughter, Elijah. Perfect little girl with her mama's stubbornness and your ugly mug." He was inside before she finished speaking. Hannah lay exhausted in the bed, her hair plastered to her forehead, her face pale but glowing. In her arms, wrapped in a clean blanket, was the tiniest person Elijah had ever seen. "Say hello to Sarah," Hannah whispered. Elijah's vision blurred. He knelt beside the bed, one finger touching his daughter's impossibly small hand. She gripped it with surprising strength. "She's perfect," he breathed. "She is." Jacob and Clara crowded in, staring at their new sister with wonder. "She's so tiny," Clara whispered. "You were that tiny once," Elijah said. "Was I this red?" "Redder." They laughed, all of them together, exhausted and grateful and whole. Martha cleaned up and left them alone. Evening fell. The cabin grew quiet except for the baby's soft breathing and Hannah's occasional murmured lullaby. Elijah carried his older children to the loft, tucking them in. "You did good today, both of you. Brave and strong." "Is Hannah really okay?" Jacob asked. "She's perfect. Tired, but perfect. And we really have a sister." "You really do." Clara smiled sleepily. "I'm gonna teach her everything. How to braid hair and pick wildflowers and everything. I'm sure she'll love that." Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then, "Papa, do you think our first mama would be happy about baby Sarah?" Elijah thought about the woman he'd loved and lost, about the wildflower quilt and the grave on the hill and the years of grief that had nearly broken him. "Yeah, son, I think she'd be real happy. I think she'd say we honored her by choosing to live, by choosing to love again." He kissed Jacob's forehead. "Your first mama gave you life. Hannah's giving you a sister. There's room in your heart for both." "I think so too." Elijah climbed back down to find Hannah nursing the baby. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me in that street. For not walking away. For giving me a life worth living." "You gave me the same thing." They sat together in the quiet cabin, a family built from broken pieces, and Elijah realized something profound: grief doesn't disappear. It just makes room for joy when you're brave enough to let it in. 5 years passed. The homestead prospered. Elijah expanded the herd, built a second barn, planted an orchard. Hannah opened a small school teaching 12 children from surrounding homesteads. Jacob, 15 now, was taller than his father and twice as stubborn. Clara 11 helped with baby Sarah and the new baby Daniel born 2 years after his sister. Tom Garrett wrote once from Denver, a short letter apologizing for the pain he'd caused, saying he was better now working as a clerk in a law office making amends where he could. He didn't ask forgiveness, just offered truth. Elijah wrote back, 3 sentences. I'm glad you're better. I hope you find peace. You're forgiven. Sometimes mercy was that simple. On a bright October morning, Elijah stood on the hill overlooking his land. Hannah came up behind him, slipping her hand into his. Thinking about her, she asked, nodding toward Sarah's grave. Always, but different now. Not with pain, just with gratitude. For what? For loving me when I was easier to love. For giving me Jacob and Clara. For teaching me that broken hearts can heal if you let them. Hannah leaned against him. Think she'd approve of how we turned out. I think she's been watching all along, making sure we didn't mess it up too badly. They stood together as their children played in the valley below, 4 voices calling and laughing, filling the air with life. Clara chased Sarah through the tall grass. Jacob taught Daniel to skip stones in the creek. This was peace. This was home. This was everything worth fighting for. I love you, Elijah said. I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and impossibly noble and sometimes too brave for your own good. That's why you love me. Maybe so. They walked back down the hill, hand in hand, toward the cabin, where smoke rose from the chimney and laundry flapped in the wind, and life continued its messy, beautiful march forward. Elijah Barnes had ridden into Fort Bridger one frozen January morning, looking for flour and salt and lamp oil. He'd found instead a starving woman who needed mercy more than bread, and in saving her he'd saved himself. Some stories end in tragedy, some end in triumph. This one ended in something better, the quiet, stubborn hope that refuses to quit even when the world says it should. Because that's what love does. It doesn't conquer everything, but it makes everything worth fighting for. It doesn't erase the past, but it builds a future anyway. It doesn't promise easy, but it promises real. And in Wyoming territory in 1881, on a homestead that had seen death and darkness and despair, one man and one woman proved that broken people could still build something whole if they were brave enough to try. They lived, they loved, they survived. And in the end, that was more than enough.